It was a chilly November evening in Boston, the kind where the wind cuts through your jacket and makes you wish you'd worn an extra layer. I was standing at the bus stop, shivering, as I watched my bus, the last one of the night, drive away without me. I'd missed it by mere seconds, and now I was stranded in a part of town I didn't know well, with my phone battery at 12%. I had been at the library studying for my college finals. Time had slipped away from me, and now it was almost midnight. The streets were nearly empty, and the few people still out didn't look like the kind I wanted to approach for help. My apartment was on the other side of the city, a good 8 miles away, too far to walk, especially in this weather. I could call an Uber, but my bank account was nearly as drained as my phone battery. End of semester broke was a real thing. I ducked into a 24-hour convenience store to escape the cold and figure out my options. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I nodded at the bored cashier. He barely looked up from his phone. "You closing soon?" I asked. "Open all night," he replied without interest. At least I had a warm place to think. I pulled out my phone and stared at the battery percentage, knowing I needed to be strategic. Who could I call? My roommates were out of town for the weekend. My boyfriend was visiting his parents in Chicago. Then I remembered my dad's side of the family was having their monthly dinner tonight at my uncle's house, just a few miles from where I was. I hadn't gone because of my study session, but they'd probably still be there. Uncle Paul always made these gatherings last until the early hours of the morning. I opened our family group chat, which included my dad, his 3 siblings, and a few cousins. I typed a simple message. "Can someone pick me up? Missed the last bus, stranded near Lexington and 5th, battery dying." I hit send and watched as the message delivered. Then I waited. 1 minute passed, then 2. The 3 little dots appeared and disappeared several times, showing someone was typing and then stopping. My anxiety grew with each passing minute. Finally, a reply came through. It was from my Aunt Patricia. "Ask your mother. She's the one who wanted you, not our problem anymore." I stared at the message in shock. What did that even mean? My parents had been divorced for years, but they'd always remained civil. At least that's what I thought. And what did she mean by "wanted you"? Before I could process it, more messages started flooding in. My Uncle Paul. "Patricia, what the hell?" My cousin Mike. "Whoa, Aunt Pat." My Uncle Dave. "Jesus Christ, Pat." And then nothing for a minute. The typing indicator appeared again, this time for longer. I waited, my heart pounding, confused and hurt by my aunt's strange message. Finally, a message from my dad. "I'm coming to get you. Stay where you are. Don't move." I felt relieved but still confused. What had just happened? Why had Aunt Patricia said those things? And why did everyone seem so shocked? I didn't have long to wonder. Less than 15 minutes later, my dad's car screeched to a halt outside the convenience store. I could see him through the window, his face tight with an expression I'd never seen before, part fury, part fear. He didn't even turn off the engine as he rushed inside. When he saw me, his face changed, softening for just a moment before the hard lines returned. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice strained. "I'm fine, Dad. Just missed my bus. What's going on? What did Aunt Patricia mean?" He shook his head. "Not now. Let's get you home first." The ride back to my apartment was tense. Dad gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He kept glancing at me, opening his mouth as if to say something, then closing it again. Finally, as we pulled up to my building, he turned to me. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." His voice cracked slightly. "But not tonight. You've had enough of a shock. Can we talk tomorrow? I'll come by around noon." I nodded, too exhausted and confused to argue. As I got out of the car, he called after me. "Emma, I love you. You know that, right? More than anything in this world." The intensity in his voice made me pause. I know, Dad. I love you too. As I walked up to my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that my entire life was about to change. What secret had my family been keeping from me all these years, and why had it made my dad run out of a family dinner without even grabbing his coat? My phone buzzed one last time before dying completely. It was my dad again. Lock your door. Don't answer if anyone comes by tonight. I'll explain everything tomorrow. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying Aunt Patricia's message over and over again. Ask your mother. She's the one who wanted you, not our problem anymore. What could that possibly mean? By morning, my phone was charged, and I saw I had dozens of missed calls and messages, mostly from family members I rarely spoke to, cousins I only saw at holidays, my grandmother who lived in Florida, even my dad's ex-business partner. Something big was happening, and somehow I was at the center of it. I ignored them all, waiting for noon when my dad would arrive. At exactly 12:01, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see not just my dad, but my mother too. They hadn't been in the same room together in years. "Can we come in?" my mom asked, her voice gentle, but her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. I led them to my small living room, where they sat awkwardly on my thrift store couch. They exchanged a look, the kind of wordless communication that only people who have known each other for decades can manage. "Emma," my dad began, his voice steadier than it had been last night. "What Aunt Patricia said in that message, it was cruel and uncalled for, but it also exposed something we've kept from you your whole life." My mom reached for my hand. "We've wanted to tell you so many times, but we could never find the right moment, and then as years passed, it got harder and harder." "Tell me what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My dad took a deep breath. "I'm not your biological father." The words hit me like a physical blow. I pulled my hand away from my mother's and stood up, needing to move, to process. "What? That's not possible. I look just like you, Dad. Everyone says so." He nodded. "You do look like me. That's part of why it was so easy to keep this private, but it's true." My mother spoke next, her voice trembling. "Before your father and I were married, we had a brief breakup. It was only for a few months, but during that time I met someone else." "Who?" I demanded. She looked down at her hands. "His name was Robert Calloway. He was a visiting professor at my university. It was a brief relationship, and when your father and I reconciled, I ended things with Robert. But then I found out I was pregnant," she continued, "with you." I felt like the room was spinning. "And this Robert, he's my real father?" My dad stood up then, his face flushing with emotion. "I'm your real father, Emma, in every way that matters. I was there when you were born. I taught you to ride a bike. I helped you with your homework. I loved you from the moment I knew about you. But biologically," I pressed. "Biologically, yes, Robert Calloway is your father," my mom admitted. I sat back down, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "Does he know about me? This Robert person?" My parents exchanged another look. "He knew your mother was pregnant," my dad said carefully, "but he didn't want any involvement. He was returning to his home country and made it clear he wasn't interested in being a parent." "What country?" I asked. "England," my mother replied. "He was only in the States for that one semester." 1,000 questions raced through my mind, but one pushed its way to the front. "So, Aunt Patricia, she knew all along?" My dad's expression darkened. "The only people who knew were your mother, me, and my sister Patricia. We decided it was best to keep it private. Your mother and I were starting our life together, and I wanted to raise you as my own. Patricia." He hesitated. "Patricia never approved," my mother finished for him. "She thought I had trapped your father, that I was using him. She wanted him to demand a paternity test to walk away. But I didn't want that, my dad insisted. I loved your mother, and I already loved you. We agreed that I would be your father in every way, and we would tell you the truth when you were older. Except you never did, I said, a surge of anger cutting through my confusion. I'm 22 years old. When exactly were you planning to tell me? We should have told you years ago, my mom admitted, tears streaming down her face now. But the longer we waited, the harder it became. We were afraid of hurting you, of changing how you saw yourself, your family. And now, the whole family knows, because of some text message, I asked incredulously. My dad nodded grimly. Patricia has been drinking heavily lately. Her husband left her last month. You wouldn't know because she made us all promise not to tell anyone. I think when she saw your message, asking for help, something in her just snapped. She's always been jealous of the relationship I have with you. After she sent that message, he continued, I ran out immediately to find you. I didn't even grab my coat. I was so worried about you finding out that way from her in such a cruel manner. I sat in silence for a long moment, trying to process everything. My entire identity felt like it was crumbling around me. The man I thought was my father wasn't biologically related to me. I had another father out there somewhere in England who wanted nothing to do with me. Does this Robert person have other children? I asked suddenly. Do I have half-siblings I don't know about? We don't know, my mother said quietly. We haven't had any contact with him since before you were born. I stood up again, needing space. I need some time to think. This is a lot. Of course, my dad, the only dad I'd ever known, said, rising as well. Take all the time you need, but please know that nothing has changed for me. You're my daughter, Emma. You always have been and you always will be. As they prepared to leave, my mother handed me a small, worn envelope. This is the only thing I have of Robert's. His contact information is probably long outdated, but I thought you should have it. If you want to reach out to him someday, that's your choice. I took the envelope without opening it. Thank you. After they left, I sat alone in my apartment, the envelope heavy in my hands. My phone continued to buzz with messages from family members, but I ignored them all. My entire life had been built on a secret, and now that secret was out. I spent the next week in a daze, barely leaving my apartment except for my final exams. I went through the motions, studying, taking tests, eating when I remembered to, but inside I felt hollow. The envelope my mother had given me sat unopened on my kitchen counter. I couldn't bring myself to look at it, but I couldn't throw it away either. My phone continued to buzz with messages from family members. I responded to a few, my cousins Mike and Jen, who'd always been more like siblings to me, and my Uncle Dave, who had been kind in his message, simply saying he was there if I needed to talk. I ignored Aunt Patricia completely, though she'd sent several long paragraphs that fluctuated between angry justification and drunken apologies. My dad, because despite everything, he was still my dad, called every day. I answered sometimes, letting him talk about mundane things, the weather, a new client at his accounting firm, the neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking. We danced around the elephant in the room, neither of us ready to dive back into the revelation that had shattered my sense of self. On Friday afternoon, as I was submitting my last final exam online, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Uncle Dave standing there, holding a large paper bag that smelled like my favorite Chinese takeout. "Thought you might be hungry," he said simply. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let him enter. Uncle Dave had always been the peacemaker in the family, the calm one amid the storm of personalities that made up the Donovans. He was my dad's younger brother, with the same dark hair and blue eyes, though his face had always been gentler somehow. "How are you holding up?" he asked as he unpacked containers of food onto my small dining table. "I've been better," I admitted, grabbing plates from the cabinet. "It's a lot to process." He nodded, opening a carton of lo mein. "I can only imagine. For what it's worth, your dad is devastated about how this all came out. He's been wanting to tell you for years." "Then why didn't he?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Uncle Dave sighed. "Fear, I suppose. Fear of losing you. Fear of changing something that wasn't broken." He passed me a plate. "Your dad and I didn't have the best father ourselves, you know. He was distant, critical. Your dad swore he'd be different with his kids." "And he was," I said quietly, feeling a surge of loyalty despite my anger. "He was," Uncle Dave agreed. "From the moment your mother told him she was pregnant, even knowing there was a chance you weren't biologically his, he was all in. I've never seen someone so excited to be a father." He paused, pushing food around on his plate. "That's why Patricia's message was so shocking. None of us knew she'd held on to that resentment all these years." "Is that why she never seemed to like me?" I asked, remembering all the times Aunt Patricia had been cool toward me at family gatherings, how she'd always lavished attention on her other nieces and nephews, but rarely on me. "Patricia has her own demons," Uncle Dave said diplomatically, "but that's no excuse for what she did." We ate in silence for a few minutes before I gathered the courage to ask the question that had been haunting me. "Do you think I should contact him? Robert Calloway?" Uncle Dave considered this carefully. "That's entirely your decision, Emma. But if you do, I want you to be prepared for any outcome. He might be thrilled to hear from you, or he might not want to be found. Either way, it doesn't change who you are or who has been there for you your entire life." After Uncle Dave left, I found myself staring at the envelope again. With trembling fingers, I finally opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a name, an address in London, and a phone number, all written in my mother's neat handwriting. At the bottom was a faded photograph, a tall man with wavy brown hair and a scholarly look, his arm around my much younger mother. They were standing in front of a university building, both smiling. I searched his face for traces of myself. We had the same chin, perhaps, and something about the set of his eyes seemed familiar, though it was hard to tell from the faded photograph. I flipped it over. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, were the words, "Sarah and Rob, Spring 1999. With the photograph in one hand and my phone in the other, I did what any person of my generation would do. I searched for Robert Calloway online. There were several, but I quickly found one who seemed to match, a professor of economics at Imperial College London. His faculty page showed an older version of the man in the photograph, his brown hair now streaked with grey, but with the same thoughtful expression. Before I could talk myself out of it, I drafted an email. "Dear Professor Calloway, my name is Emma Donovan. I believe you knew my mother, Sarah Donovan, née Mitchell, in 1999 when you were a visiting professor at Boston University. This may come as a shock, but I recently learned that you are my biological father. I was born on January 12th, 2000. I don't know if you were ever aware of my existence or if you wish to have any contact now. I've only just discovered this information myself and am still processing it. If you're open to communication, I would appreciate hearing from you. If not, I understand, and I wish you well. Sincerely, Emma Donovan." My finger hovered over the send button for a long time. Was I ready for this? What if he rejected me again? What if he welcomed me with open arms? I wasn't sure which possibility frightened me more. In the end, I saved the draft, but didn't send it. I needed more time. The next morning, I woke to a text from my dad. "Can we talk? In person?" We met at a small coffee shop near campus, neutral territory. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and new lines on his face that hadn't been there a week ago. "I've been thinking about what you asked," he said after we'd gotten our drinks. About why we never told you the truth. I waited, giving him space to find his words. When you were little, you were too young to understand. Then, as you got older, your mother and I kept waiting for the right time. When you were 10, we thought we'd wait until you were a teenager. When you were a teenager, we thought we'd wait until you went to college. He sighed, but the truth is, I was afraid. Terrified, actually. Of what? I asked. That you wouldn't see me as your father anymore, he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. That you'd want to find him and he'd be, I don't know, more impressive, more interesting, that you'd choose him. Dad, I said, reaching across the table to take his hand, you raised me. You were there for every scraped knee, every school play, every nightmare and triumph. No one could ever replace that. He squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I should have trusted in that, in us. I'm so sorry, Emma. I'm still angry, I told him honestly, not about who my biological father is, but that you and Mom kept it from me, that I had to find out the way I did. He nodded. You have every right to be angry. We made a mistake, a well-intentioned one, but a mistake nonetheless. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 2 decades of secrets between us. I found him, I said finally, online. He's a professor in London. My dad's face tightened, but he nodded again. Are you going to contact him? I drafted an email, I admitted, but I haven't sent it yet. I'm not sure if I'm ready. Whatever you decide, he said carefully, I'll support you. If you want to meet him, I'll help make that happen. If you want to have a relationship with him, I won't stand in the way. I studied his face, seeing the pain it cost him to say those words, but also the love, the unconditional love that had been the foundation of my life. Thank you, I said, but whatever happens with Robert Calloway, you're my dad. That's never going to change. As we left the coffee shop, my dad pulled me into a fierce hug, holding me as if he might never let go. Over his shoulder, I saw my phone light up with a new notification. Aunt Patricia was calling. Again. This time I decided I would answer. It was time to face all the pieces of this family secret, no matter how painful. But first, I held on to my dad a little longer, drawing strength from the man who had chosen to be my father, biology be damned. 3 days later, I found myself sitting across from Aunt Patricia at a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of Boston. She looked older than I remembered, her once vibrant red hair now dull, her face lined with years of hard living and, more recently, grief over her failed marriage. Thank you for meeting me, she said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. I know I don't deserve it. I didn't come for you, I said honestly. I came for me. I need answers. She nodded, accepting this. What do you want to know? Everything, I said, from the beginning. Patricia sighed, taking a long sip of her water before speaking. Your mother and my brother dated in college. They were the golden couple. But your mother got a fellowship in New York for a year, and they decided to take a break. That's when she met Robert, I prompted. Yes, Patricia confirmed. When she came back to Boston, she and Tom got back together, until about 2 months later, when she found out she was pregnant. And she told him the baby might not be his, I said. Patricia nodded. She did. She told him about Robert, that the timing meant you could be either man's. She said she'd understand if he wanted to walk away. But he didn't, I said softly. No, Patricia admitted. He insisted they get married right away. Said he didn't care who the biological father was. And you disapproved, I stated. Patricia looked away. I thought she was trapping him. Tom had such a bright future. I thought Sarah was using the pregnancy to lock him down. No? Was that fair to her? I challenged. She gave him a choice. No, Patricia admitted. It wasn't fair. The truth is, I was jealous. Tom and I were always close growing up. When he met Sarah, everything changed. "Why did you keep the secret all these years, only to blurt it out in a group text?" I asked. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was drunk and angry. My husband had just left me. I was watching everyone else's perfect lives, or what seemed perfect, and then your text came through. All I could think was that you were another burden on my brother." "That's not fair," I said, my voice hard. "I wasn't asking for a kidney. I just needed a ride." "I know," she said, wiping at her eyes. "It was cruel and inexcusable. I've been in therapy since that night." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of family dynamics settling between us. "Have you decided if you're going to contact him, Robert?" Patricia asked finally. I hesitated, then pulled out my phone. "I wrote to him yesterday. He responded this morning." Patricia's eyes widened. "What did he say?" I opened the email and read it aloud. "Dear Emma, your email came as quite a shock. I had no idea of your existence until now. Sarah never informed me she was pregnant, though given the circumstances, I understand why. I want you to know I would never have rejected you. The choice to have no involvement wasn't mine. It was a decision made without my knowledge. Had I known about you, things might have been very different. I have 2 children with my wife of 20 years. Your half-siblings, I suppose. They're 18 and 16 now. If you're open to it, I would very much like to meet you. I'll be at a conference in Boston next month. Perhaps we could arrange something then. Whatever you decide, thank you for reaching out. Robert." Patricia stared at me, speechless for perhaps the first time in her life. "Are you going to meet him?" she finally asked. "I think so," I said. "Not to replace Dad, no one could ever do that, but to know where I come from, to fill in the missing pieces." As we were leaving the restaurant, Patricia stopped me with a gentle hand on my arm. "Emma, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I am truly sorry for the pain I caused you." I looked at her, this woman who had harbored a secret and a grudge for my entire life, and felt my anger beginning to dissolve. Not completely, that would take time, but enough to see her as a flawed human being rather than a villain. "We're family," I said simply. "That doesn't go away, even when we hurt each other." 2 weeks later, I sat on a bench in Boston Common, my father beside me. We were waiting for Robert Calloway, who had flown in early for his conference specifically to meet me. "You don't have to stay," I told my dad for the 3rd time. "I know," he said, squeezing my hand, "but I want to. I want to meet the man who gave me the greatest gift of my life. You." I leaned my head against his shoulder, overwhelmed with love for this man who had chosen me day after day for my entire life. "There he is," my dad said suddenly, nodding toward a tall man approaching across the grass. Robert Calloway looked much like his photo, though his hair was grayer. As he drew closer, I could see my own features reflected in his face, the shape of our eyes, the curve of our chins. I stood, my heart pounding. Here was the missing piece of my identity walking toward me. But as I felt my dad's steady presence beside me, I realized that while DNA might determine biology, it was love that defined family. And by that measure, I'd never been missing anything at all. "Hello, Emma," Robert said, his voice carrying the crisp accent of London. It's wonderful to finally meet you." "Hello," I replied, reaching out to shake his hand. "This is my dad, Tom Donovan." The 2 men regarded each other for a moment before Tom extended his hand. "Thank you for coming," he said with quiet dignity. "Emma has a lot of questions." As we walked together through the park, my past and present side by side, I felt a strange sense of completion. The road ahead would be complicated, navigating these new relationships and redefining old ones. But for the first time since that text message a month ago, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be.